Hello, my name is Mel Albin, and I'm going to be your host for Making the Invisible Visible. What we're going to talk about today is really very important. It's a major change in how business is done globally. We're going to talk about particularly in the United States and in the local economy. The visible economy is really relatively new. It's something which really took off after 2010. It's directly related to several things. First, it's related to social media, where a number of businesses now have found customers and platforms, and we'll talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages. But what we're going to focus on are businesses that don't have websites, that are probably home-based and based in social media. And we're going to talk about how large this part of the economy has gotten, and the fact that predominantly it is owned by Black people who have started their own businesses, a number of which were started as a result of the pandemic and displacement from employment. So we're going to take a look at the invisible economy and try to find out, why is it invisible? And what do we have to do to make it visible and a vibrant part of the economic life of the community? The invisible economy is really the key to building generational wealth, because these are businesses owned within families, and this is where generational wealth begins. We're going to take a look at this again closely, take a look at what institutions and agencies are required for this visible economy to become visible, and what's the impact of the visible economy. Once it becomes visible, what's the impact on the local economy, municipalities, and the nation? And we're going to see that it is a critical piece of how business is done in the 21st century. And part of the reason it has gone unrecognized is that we're using obsolete methods to understand what a business is and how businesses begin. So let me start again. This is the Source Radio Network, and my show is all about Black and minority businesses, and this is an important piece of that show and the planning that businesses need to do. So how do we make small Black and minority businesses visible? That's what we're after today. How large is the invisible economy? Does it really matter? And it certainly does, and that's what we're going to see. Prior to the pandemic in 2019, an IAW study said that the invisible economy, the small home and social media-based businesses, were equal to 5.4% of the country's GDP. And that's significant, even at 5.4%. A more recent Brookings Institute study that was done this year puts the invisible economy at between 11 and 12%. Okay, and that roughly is equivalent to 2.25 trillion, $2.5 trillion. So, we're starting to look at scale here and the size of this invisible economic community, and how do we make it more vibrant, and how do we support it and nurture it, and help to sustain and grow new businesses in our country. And who's the owner? We're going to take a close look at this too, because it's interesting. So what happened between 2019 and 2022? Well, the invisible economy has doubled. The impact of the pandemic on jobs, particularly in hospitality, healthcare, hospice care, nursing, children and senior care, is an area where many Blacks are employed. And those jobs were terminated because of the pandemic. And that provided the opportunity for Black people who became unemployed, and the rate of unemployment was much higher than that of the white population, to start their own home businesses. They had the perfect opportunity. They were home, and now they had time to start their business. And part of the reason they started is Everyone really thought that if you are part of the healthcare community, the hospitality community, they'll always need your service and that you'll always have jobs, and what they found was that's not true, that there's no job security, within the economy, and you have to protect yourself. So a lot of these home businesses started on social media as supplemental, assuming that the pandemic will end, they'll go back to work, but this will be kind of a safety valve and provide additional income, and they can have some savings should this ever happen again. So there's multiple reasons. We'll look at more of these more closely. But the thing to remember is that within 3 years, the invisible economy doubled in size and represents a significant part of our economy. The invisible economy is dominated by Black people. Black minority home and social media small businesses to this day remain invisible to municipal, state, and federal organizations, and remain invisible to critical institutions like banks, shopping networks, the Minority Business Development Agency, which is responsible within the Department of Commerce for assisting small Black and minority businesses, and the Small Business Administration, which is a quasi-government agency that is really the link between federal programs and banks and large businesses. The SBA, Small Business Administration, defines a small business as having less than $5 million in income and less than 5,000 employees. That is not a small business by any means. So let's take a closer look. Why are the invisible economy? Why is it dominated by Black-owned businesses? Let's take a look at the breakdown of businesses in the country. The most common ethnicity among business owners is white. White people make up 70.8% of all business owners, far greater than their portion of the population, which is around 50%. So, here's an example where race matters. And why have Black businesses not been as successful as white businesses? Why aren't Black businesses proportionate to the Black population, which is far fewer businesses than, in this case, white businesses that are overrepresented based on their percentage of the population? There are 6 million employer businesses. Now, let me make this clear what the difference is. An employee-owned business is a sole proprietorship that has no employees. An employer business has at least 2 employees. It will be the owner and one other employee. So in the US, only 2% of all employer businesses, only 2% are Black owned. That's 120,000 employer firms that are Black owned. What that means is over 95% of the 2.6 million Black owned firms are sole proprietorships. They only have the owner as employee. They have no other employees in the business. That has to do with scale. What's the annual size of sales? And the annual size of sales is typically less than 50,000 in annual sales. So, and so when you look at the invisible economy, 95% of the 2.6 million businesses are sole proprietorships. So that's one thing we should keep in mind. We're going to talk about this more. By comparison, only 13% of white-owned businesses have annual incomes under $100,000. So only 13% of white-owned businesses have annual income under $100,000. So you look at it from the perspective of that 95% of the 2.6 million Black firms have less than 50,000. Only 13% of white businesses have less than 100,000. You can see the complete disparity between employee-employer businesses and the amount of wealth generated by small businesses annually. And so this is institutional racism at its worst, and it's really severely hurting not just the Black community, which it is, but it's hurting the economic community of municipalities, counties, state, and state government. And at that level, the amount of jobs that are being lost as a result of this is quite staggering. The jobs, income, and tax base and real estate are severely affected by the fact that most of the black businesses that are small are only sole proprietorships. I'm going to take a closer look at why this is the case. First, the problem is, why is it invisible? It's because we're not identifying these businesses, and there's a variety of reasons. First of all, we're using 20th century methods to analyze 21st century business formation. Increasingly, businesses are virtual and not physical. We know this. We know this from Shopify, from Amazon. I mean, we're quite aware. So many retail businesses that have traditionally have had physical locations, like for example, Macy's department stores, or even Walmart. They have developed huge online businesses, and it's really kind of been the death knell of the shopping mall. People prefer to shop online, and even if they're going to go for a sale and shop in a physical location, they first do all their research and check everything out online. So the world has changed dramatically, particularly since 2010. And now, because business is increasingly virtual and don't have a physical real estate location, it's not as easily discernible. The World Wide Web has transformed business scale. Where it's performed, who owns the business, and most importantly, its visibility. Because we don't visibly see the sales that a lot of these businesses make, if it goes through social media, it may go through Cash App, it may go through PayPal or credit cards. But basically, a lot of the business that goes through Cash App, even though they're trying to make Cash App more visible for tax purposes, a lot of the business isn't visible, and it occurs in social media. Now, let me make a comment about that. That means that a lot of these 95% of the 2.6 million small black businesses don't have websites. Websites are critical because they issue what's called SSL certificates, and that protects the buyer from having their account hacked. It affords a level of protection. Social media does not offer or have SSL certificates. So that's why the bulk of the purchases are still made on a website. That's why Walmart has one, Macy's has one, Amazon is a website, even though they're starting to go the other direction, have some physical locations. Basically, they offer SSL certificates and protection for the buyer against their account being hacked. Okay. Municipal government and financial institutions have ignored the invisible economy because of the difficulty of measuring its importance of finding out where these businesses are. So, because they're hard to find and because they're so small in terms of scale, they're not looked at as closely as a physical location in the shopping mall. When you look at most counties and they advertise, come to the county, move your business here, they're talking about physical location and real estate. And that's where their emphasis is, because that's traditionally been the way in which communities prosper, municipalities thrive, cities and counties become successful because they start to increase wealth through business transactions, real estate, taxes, etc. Hence, the invisible economy has not appeared to have had an important effect, so they could be safely disregarded. Since nobody knows the size, nobody knows the impact, it's easy just to say, well, we're just going to ignore them. But you can't ignore them anymore. This is 2022. This is post-pandemic. These businesses have doubled in size, the amount of businesses out there that are part of this invisible economy within a 3-year period. So think about this, and they represent 11 or 12% of the GDP. How can you ignore this any longer? So we're going to try to see, how do we make these invisible businesses visible? How do we make municipalities, banks, the SBA, and shopping platforms, how do we make sure that they're scaled to be able to successfully help a business of this size? Typically, the money never trickles down this low. These businesses are left to fend for themselves. If they can raise their annual sales of $250,000, then the SBA and then money center banks like J.P. Morgan Chase, or Bank of America, or shopping networks like Amazon may be able to find ways to make it palatable for these small businesses to afford to be able to grow their businesses to the $250,000 plateau. The $250,000 annual sales plateau is an unannounced barrier to access. If you have a small business in that, they won't tell you this. It's not a written law, but they won't look at you. In fact, Amazon says if your business is making $250,000, we have a special minority program. You have to take a look at how many Black businesses are there on Amazon. I had to go to the 10Qs and 10Ks for the SEC to try to find out exactly how many Black businesses are represented on Amazon, and the number is 0.003%. That's 0.03% of Black businesses. So why? Because their pricing scale doesn't work. It's too expensive for a business that's earning less than $50,000 annually. It just doesn't work. So, there's multiple reasons why these small Black businesses have remained home businesses. They remain side hustles. They don't necessarily get the traction that white businesses get that has more generational family wealth, for example, and can start out with more capital. A lot of these small Black businesses have created tremendous innovation and invention, and they don't even know how to patent, a copyright and protect the ideas they've created. And, it's a serious issue, and it's an issue of race. And it's something that can be addressed, and we're going to try to keep addressing it during this presentation. The invisible economy is to a large extent the product of racial imbalance in the U.S. That's what I've just been alluding to. In the early 1960s, white people held 7 times more family wealth than Black people. The wealth of the family of white people was 7 times greater than Black people. In 2022, it was reported by the Brookings Institute that white people now hold 7.8 times more family wealth than Black people. So here we've had the Civil Rights Movement of the 1960s. You had the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act. We've had 50 years, 60 years to remove the barriers to access, to level the playing field for Black businesses and Black wealth. And what do we find? It's gotten worse. That it's gone from 7 to almost 8 times more family wealth than Black people in white families. So making the visible economy visible, also supporting and making it part of an increasingly strong basis for generational wealth is the key to building equality in the future. Black minority businesses and the national economy will thrive if we can find ways to support these businesses and have the wealth required to create them, sustain them, and grow them the way white businesses have had a much greater opportunity. Black-owned small businesses lack the success, and it's attributable in part to institutional racism. That's what I'm talking about here. And a lot of it is that, you have to care enough to want to make it visible. It's the fate of many people that no one cares enough to be able to identify and strengthen the lives, of people in communities. So what's the difference between the white and Black family? Well, startup capital is usually based on generational wealth. And as we've seen, Black families today, let me reverse that. White families today have 7.8, almost 8 times the wealth of a Black family. So if they're going to start a business, the capital is there. Credit risk, 72% of white businesses have low credit risk compared to 33% of Blacks. So the low credit risk is much greater amongst whites because they have more capital. They take on, the debt to income or debt ratio is usually lower, and therefore their credit rating is higher. That leads to differences in generational wealth, and of course, there's differences in education. And that gap has been narrowing over the years, for sure. But these are the differences that lead to the invisible economy. As a result, Black-owned businesses have lower revenue and profits, which we've seen. They have fewer employees, which we've seen. And they're more likely to close than white-owned businesses. 8 out of 10 Black-owned businesses close their doors within 2 years of operation. 8 out of 10. So, it's staggeringly high. Between 40 and 50% of Black businesses closed during the pandemic, and it was a much smaller percentage. It was closer to 30% for white-owned businesses. So it's significantly harsher when economies turn down and there's pressure on these small businesses because they don't have the resources, the savings, the credit, the bank connections, the scale to sustain themselves. Twice the number of Black-owned businesses closed during the pandemic as did white-owned businesses. That's substantial, and that's really an issue of why the economy is invisible and why it's essential to make it visible. Black people comprise approximately 14.2% of the U.S. population, but Black businesses, as we've seen, only comprise 2.2% of the nation's 5.7 million employer businesses. And again, that turns to more than one employee, and we've seen that so few, only 120,000, are owned by Blacks. So predominantly higher revenue and multiple employees is the province of white businesses, and we need to get Black businesses to that scale to level the playing field. According to the most recent SBO report, 3.2% of Black-owned businesses operate with employees. So somewhere between 2.2 and 3.2% of employer businesses are Black-owned businesses. By contrast, 30.6% of white-owned businesses are employer-based businesses. Look at the difference. It's 10 times greater if you're a white-owned business that you'll be part of the employer population, meaning to get more revenue, payroll, and the chance to grow substantially rests in your favor. And again, this is something that we really need to address. And the way to address it is really at the municipal level. It's the government level. They can bring the banks to the table, but the banks aren't going to go there by themselves. First, again, it's invisible to them, a lot of these businesses. And second, they don't have the assets to warrant a community satellite office. So you see debanking take place in a lot of Black communities where a lot of the invisible economy resides. So it's an issue, and the municipal government is a place where this wrong can be addressed. But we have to get the municipal government to the table, and that's not easy. Consequence of the invisible economy. The systemic shortage of Black employer businesses dampens employment and the development of Black communities. Underrepresentation of Black businesses is costing both the local and national economy millions of jobs and billions of dollars in revenue. And we're going to take a look at what this stream is like. And it's substantial, and it can't be ignored any longer. It has to be addressed. And there are ways to make the invisible businesses visible by holding, an invisible business summit and inviting businesses that are family-based and social media-based to attend, along with municipalities who will provide services and support, shopping networks that will lower pricing, like Shop Black Enterprise, that businesses can afford to be represented on a global scale or a national or local scale. There are ways in which this can be accomplished, and we're going to take a look at some of the ways in which we make the invisible visible. Business distribution by industry. Where are these businesses? Nearly a third of all Black firms in the U.S. are in healthcare and social assistance fields, and Black women own more than half of them. I mean, so when you look at this, which group is probably paid the poorest? Black women. And Black women own 54% of the business. It's not a coincidence. Again, it becomes a side hustle. It becomes a means to grow a business and get yourself out of a low-paying job and be able to generate and build more family wealth. So it's clustered within healthcare, hospitality, and social assistance fields. That's where a lot of Black businesses are clustered. There may be other, and there are many other industries too: hospice care, senior care, contact nurses. Contract nurses are a very significant part of this population. Construction contractors of every stripe, from pressure washing to construction road services, carpentry, handymen, electricians, plumbers, all part of the construction industry where you find a lot of Black men and Black women now too. Beauty consultants, including hairstylists and cosmeticians. personal trainers, substitute teachers and tutors. This is the domain of individual gig workers that is also a very large part of the invisible economy and the Black economy. If Black businesses accounted for 14.2% of employer firms, if they were equal, now remember, 70% of all the businesses, 70.8%, are white owned, and they only represent 50% of the population. Black people represent 14.2% of the population. Okay? But if they had employer businesses that were equivalent to the size of the representation in the population, there would be 806,218 more Black businesses. What does that mean? We'll take a look. It's going to mean a huge increase in jobs. You're looking at over close to over three quarters of a million new Black businesses should be there if they just were equal to the population. Again, within the white population, it's 50%. It's between 40 and 50% is what the white population is. They own over 70% of the businesses, far disproportionate to that population. Remember, sole proprietorship accounts for 95% of all Black businesses and not employer-based businesses. Black employer businesses pay their employees an average salary in 2021, that's where the data comes from, of $29,882, compared to $51,357 that white businesses pay on average. I mean, when you look at this, if we could get Black businesses to pay similar wages to white businesses, it would solve the employment problem overnight in terms of steady work and good jobs. You know, a lot of businesses can't get enough workers, and you wonder, with unemployment so low, maybe that's the reason, but there's other reasons. Nobody wants those jobs. You know, a lot of warehouse jobs, they have something called PTO, personal time off. It's in your contract. You come to work in the morning, you put your child to daycare, you get to the job, they don't have any work for you. They send you home. You don't get paid. You don't get paid for daycare. You know, and they wonder why they can't hold and retain, so they have to pay huge bonuses to get people to work for them. Part of the way of solving this problem is if we had a wage that was $51,357 and paid to Black people, they didn't have to take jobs with this PTO, you know, because those jobs tend to pay higher because they can't keep and get enough employees. So this is all part of the invisible economy. These are gig workers that we don't see. If the number of Black businesses match the population size and the employees prefer and match non-Black businesses, it would create 19 million more jobs. Over 19 million, close to 20 million new jobs. Just if we could get employer businesses proportionate to the Black population. That's how important the invisible economy is to the economy of the nation. The median Black household wealth, $9,000, is 1/15 that of non-Black households, estimated at $134,520. This is analysis I made of the 2020 Survey of Income and Program Participation SIP data. It shows a different disparity in household wealth between 9,000 and 154,520. It's 1/15 of the size of household income. And that's what we saw before we looked at household wealth too. The numbers match up. How do we make the invisible visible? We spent a lot of time on identifying it. How do we make it work? A home-based business needs to be made visible to consumers, and typically they use social media, word of mouth. Banks, it's very critical, financial institutions and investors. How do you make your home business or a social media business relevant to these institutions, which typically don't see you and also, because of scale, don't care about you? Public and private contractors, how do you get contracts? For many of these small businesses that could get contracts, for example, if they're in logistics and they do deliveries, they don't know how to find the contracts, apply for the contracts. You know, it takes work and it takes people who have skill sets. And within municipal government, they have these skill sets to be able to assist these home businesses to find and locate contracts. For example, if you have a logistics company, you have one delivery truck, you can apply for a contract that may require 15 delivery trucks. They'll fund you if they approve you and wait for you to get up to speed and begin the contract. So they'll be able to give you money up front so you can buy the other 14 vehicles and be able to fulfill the contract. You don't have to start off with a fleet of vehicles. And this is part of having someone who has expertise in the area of contract writing to assist the home and social media small business. And of course, these resources reside tremendously within local, municipal, state, and federal government agencies. Here's 5 ways to make your home business visible. I am the CEO of Source Radio Network, and we offer through the Shop Black Enterprise Showcase with our sister company, Shop Black Enterprise. For $25, you can have an infomercial for 10 minutes. You could be interviewed by 2 hostesses. You can talk about your business. You can show samples of your products and services. And we have tremendous reach. Within, for example, the Delaware, Maryland, Virginia area, our shows have a regular viewing audience of 160,000 people. Where can you find that for $25? And we're doing this because we want to make these businesses visible. We're not trying to make a killing here. We want to give them a chance that they never have to be on radio, be on the airwaves, and to reach a large audience. If they're looking for a larger audience because they're an internet-based home business or a social media business, we reach over 3 million people in North America and over 38 million people a week throughout the world in 145 different countries. So this is a great opportunity for $25. Usually a 20, 30-second spot will cost you $25, and we're giving the business 10 full minutes to make their case and show their wares. If they bring 2 other merchants to their own showcase, and I'm sure they know what the business is, they get a second free 10-minute infomercial. So why radio? Well, social media has its limitations. I mentioned before, for example, the sales doesn't have SSL certificates, but more importantly, when people go to social media, they're going to sites to find what they know they're looking for. Now, understand what I'm saying. They go to sites to find what they know they're looking for already. When you're on radio, you're reaching people who never thought about you and might say, wow, I never thought of that business. I'm going to go there. I'm going to go online. You're reaching a vast audience of people that are new customers that may never have thought about or your business or heard about your business. So radio has a range of getting new businesses, not just people already know you and know your social media site or know they're looking for a specific product. But these are people who turn on the radio, tune into Source, and they hear about businesses they have never thought about working with before. Another way is to host your own radio show on the Source. If you're an expert in some area, healthcare, hospitality, have your own show. When you have your own show, you get listeners. Listeners become customers. Become a Black minority small business expert on a local TV station. Contact your local TV station. Tell them what you do. Tell them if they need an expert in the area in which you are, involved, that they should call you. Write about home businesses for your local paper or business journal. Contact newspapers. Contact free papers and tell them you'd like to write an article or have a regular place in their newspaper, magazine, or free paper to provide important information about whatever your expertise may be. And also create a business press release for distribution. This enhances your brand, and you just send it out. You get a list of places where you want them to advertise or offer publicity for your business, and you create a press release and let everybody know that you're in business and this is what you do. So here are 5 ways to help make your invisible business visible. And it doesn't cost a lot of money. That's what I'm trying to tell you. A lot of this is your time, not your money. Okay, if you have a home business or a business in social media, there are several things you can do to sustain and grow it. Black minority businesses need to attract and target Black shoppers. Joining the Shop Black Enterprise sales network, Shop Black Enterprise is a very interesting business. They have over 2,000 merchants already that are Black and minority owned, and you keep 100% of your sale, unlike other shopping networks that take a portion of it. And what's the fee? The fee is super low. It's not based on how many products you sell. You can sell one or 100. It makes no difference. It's a cooperative association that's partially owned by the merchant members, whether you're in a service industry like accounting, or healthcare, or you're in a product industry. It doesn't make a difference. You keep 100% of your sale. There's a monthly membership dues of $9.95. That's all you pay. You keep your whole sale. The Shop Black Enterprise doesn't take one dime of your sale. And they promote you through the Shop Black Enterprise Showcase that I told you about on Source Radio Network. So you have the opportunity through a huge sales platform, Shop Black Enterprise, on the World Wide Web to sell locally or globally. And you have a chance, because once you're a member, you're in the rotation to be on Source automatically and to have your 10 minutes periodically, to be able to advertise sales when you're having it, whatever. So here's a way for very little money to get your brand out there and greatly enhance your sales. Okay. And again, Shop Black Enterprise is only for Black and minority businesses. Use Shop Black Enterprise. They have low-cost tools and techniques to help build your business. Being invisible is a problem. A lot of these invisible businesses don't pay taxes because they have very little income. And the problem is then no bank is going to take you seriously. So there are low-cost tools on Shop Black Enterprise. They can build a business plan. They can take to any bank, and you can show that you're a viable business. So besides the ability to make sales and maybe to create partnerships with other people in your industry and create scale so you get noticed more readily, it makes a lot more sense going 50% of a big pie than 100% of a little pie. So maybe you need to look at other companies when you join Shop Black Enterprise or in the same industry, and maybe you can form relationships and you can cut your marketing costs, your expenses, maybe even share employees and share ad space. So there's ways in which you can work with other businesses too through Shop Black Enterprise. And also contact your county government to see what programs they have to support your business. They have programs. They won't come to you often. You have to go to them. And that's what we're trying to turn around on Source Radio, to make municipalities more interested in going to you. It's in their interest, and it's certainly in your interest. What's in it for local and state governments? Well, my work in this area has shown that there are approximately 5,000 Black businesses in most cities and most counties that are part of the invisible economy. If they created 2 new jobs, it would create 10,000 new jobs in that municipality or that community. They could occupy retail space, which that leads to to higher property values. It leads to more money within the community, and it leads to a higher tax base and more essential services that are at a higher level, including education. And it could add not just to the significant wealth of the community, but also to the nation at the same time. So I hope I've given you some ideas about what the invisible economy is, its size, its huge, its importance, why it's been invisible, how we can make it visible, and how we need to involve at the very beginning municipalities, city governments, and also retail businesses, who can benefit from assisting you. You may have products that they sell that they can get from you at a better price and better quality than somewhere else. So there's so much opportunity between retail businesses, banks, government agencies to be able to, for the first time, recognize these businesses. And I mentioned one of the key ways to do it is through a summit and inviting these businesses. If there's 5,500 show up, that's 10%, or even 5%, 250 show up, that's 250 businesses you didn't know existed before that could be turned to employer businesses, help get employees with a good wage, reduce unemployment, increase generational wealth, and increase the wealth of the county and municipality. It's a win-win. So if you need more information and you want to talk with me, my information is up there. You can contact me through info@sourceradio.com or info@choplackenterprise.com. If you want to call, the number is 914-334-1599. I hope you enjoyed the tour of the invisible economy. I hope you understand its significance and why it's languished and no one's been really looking at it. And it has to do with scale, and it has to do with the fact that we're still using 20th century tools and not 21st century tools to understand it. So again, I thank you for your time. I hope you all have a wonderful remainder of the weekend. Today's Sunday, and I look forward to hearing from you if you have some questions. Bye-bye.